Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be taking a look at the 2024 European Chess Club Cup. This tournament has already ended, actually for a few days. There were plenty of exciting games worth checking out. Before, I mostly did videos that I was commenting on the men's games because the truth is that well, of course, in my opinion, people they tend to be focusing more on the men's games because there are more because of course male players they are at the top of their game and representing the pinnacle of their of chess. But in classical games or slower games, the time control is slower, most of the time the top male players they usually just play very steadily, not going for any risky things. They're just playing really solid without a lot of up and downs, just really or highlights. So it's actually just really boring sometimes. It can feel a bit monotonous. The situation with the female players, although, is completely different. Although their level isn't as high or isn't as high as the male players, but their games are still pretty entertaining to look at. And the precision of each move, it's actually a little bit off. The women's games are full of twists and turns and are actually very entertaining. The various mistakes or inaccuracies or strategies that arise in their games are actually more suitable for us ordinary people to take a look at. In my opinion, when we take a look at these kinds of games where it's actually not not that accurate, you can actually sometimes learn from these mistakes or inaccuracies, but again, you can also learn the good moves that it learn from the good moves that has been played in the game. Yeah, it's hard for us ordinary folks to find fault, and the fun of watching is a bit less if we watch the male players play. For just imagine you're watching Magnus play chess, you're just watching his games, but he is just playing every single move like a computer, and you can't really understand what these moves mean, and that might not be that might not be as useful as watching these games where are less inaccurate but still still played by the top players, women's players. All right. That is why today I specifically want to analyze a game from the women's section in the 2024 European Chess Club Cup, and this is a game played by one of the players, she is from China, and she is one of the Chinese female chess player. Her name is Zhu Jiner. I hope you guys heard of her, or even though you haven't, you might not heard of her, I'm just gonna quickly introduce her to you. She's actually quite famous in China and one of the best among the young players. She is about 20 years old. I guess about 20 years old. And in this tournament, she won a very crucial game for her team and led her team to actually not the champion, but second place, which is also really amazing. All right. And that is why today we'll be taking a look at her game. Again, her games are not the most accurate. Each move is not that accurate. Of course, the quality, the whole quality of the game is not as high as the male players, the top male players' games, but still it can teach us a lot of things. All right, let's go into this game. Zhu Jiner is white, and she is facing here Laura Rogule. Here. In the game, e4 was played, and now c5, knight f3, d6, bishop b5, and bishop d7. This is the Sicilian defense, and c4. Actually, here, c4 is not the most common move. I think the more common move is here to take the bishop, and here black has two options basically, either to take with the queen or take with the knight. Here, you can actually take with the knight. I think like taking with the knight after knight takes d7, short castle, and after knight gf6, queen e2. This is like how you play on while just develop with, for example, like c3, d4 ideas, and rook e1, and black will just trying to develop with probably g6, bishop g7. And here if you take with the queen, then this means that black is going to develop his knight to the c6 square. Here white can actually either go c4 to prevent black from having any d5 ideas, or you can also go short castle, and after knight f6, rook e1 for example, knight c6, and let's say white goes d4, or if you want to go c4, you can still go c4, but let's say you go d4, takes, and probably black will go g6 here. All right. This is actually just a quick, like, I'm just trying to quickly show you guys how this opening is like. But in the game c4, this line was played, and knight c6. Of course, black can also take on b5, and after c takes b5, this pawn might be a little bit weak, and black here can go, for example, like knight f6 just to develop, attack the e4 pawn. Worth notice is that here you cannot go queen a5. It is not good. You might feel like I want to win this pawn back with the queen, but it doesn't have any usage at all. There's just knight c3, and while will defend this pawn perfectly, so queen a5 is not like necessary at all. Black can even go a6 here, but a6 is not the best move because you are like getting rid of white's one of white's weaknesses, and that is not necessary as well. Here you just have to remember that the best move for black is to go knight f6. And yeah. But in the game, instead of taking on b5, black played knight d6 instead, and white played d4, takes, and a6, kicking the bishop. Bishop takes c6, and of course, you don't want to go back because there's now just b5. Of course, queen a5 doesn't do anything. It might seem a little bit like scary, like checking your king, but you can just simply block it. And the bishop is defended by the queen. You just go knight d3 and block the check, defend the bishop, defend the pawn, and it should be fine. And if black were to take, remember to take the bishop first with check, and after king takes, you now queen d4. All right, and that's why white didn't play bishop a4. Well, actually, bishop a4, I didn't show you guys the whole variation. Black plays b5 here, and after c takes b5, knight d4, queen d4, a takes b5. White will have a slight problem with development, as you can see. The knight, the bishop, as well as you can see that the rook on a is now putting a lot of pressure actually on the a pawn. Alright, so that's why white in the game didn't play bishop a4, but played bishop takes c6 instead, and after b takes c6, short castle, knight f6, knight c3, e5, and knight c2. Probably, here, white has many options here to stay better. White can also go knight f5 here, but it's actually a little bit more aggressive and needs more calculation. Bishop takes f5, let's say, and after e takes f5, here, black simply just let's say he develops or she develops with bishop e7, then for example queen f3. Here basically black's idea is to push d5, and white for example goes queen f3, attack the c6 pawn, and let's say d5, rook d1, e4, oh not d4. Oh, well, actually d4 doesn't work because there's queen c6. But let's say black goes e4, and after queen g3 for example, you can see that even though black the center pawn structure might look a little bit scary, like the 3 linked pawns together, but actually you can see that the main problem is that black is much slower in development than white is. And you can see that also black has a lot of weaknesses. The g7 pawn right now is being attacked. The c6 pawn is actually pretty weak. Maybe in the future even the a6 pawn. And actually already the d5 pawn in this position is under a lot of pressure, and it's actually not that easy for black to push the pawns. Let's say if black pushes d4 here, don't be scared by black's by these 2 pawns, because they cannot be pushed further after bishop f4. First of all, you cannot take because you lose the queen. And if you go d3, just keep on pushing. Well, unfortunately, there's now bishop e5. You will lose the e4 pawn on the next move after takes, and it should be winning for white. Knight f5 is actually okay. Knight c2 is kind of like more solid. Probably the idea is to go knight e3 in the future, or knight b4, or just to like support b4. Bishop e7, queen d3, short castle, bishop g5, knight e8. This is the first mistake made in this game by black. Of course, you can see that white is threatening to take on f6 on the next move, because if black were to take on f6, let's takes, you'll lose the d6 pawn. And of course, you definitely don't want to take with the g pawn to ruin your pawn structure. And that is why in this position, black definitely needs to move the knight away, but you have to decide where to get your knight to. Here, knight h5 is the best move, because like black is threatening to go knight f4 on the next move. This will be a better, much more like a better outpost for black's knight than e8. The knight on e8 is just way too passive, and it is being played in the game. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and rook fd1. You can see that now the main problem is that it's two knights versus knight and bishop. And these two knights, first of all, let's just compare. These two knights are actually not in their most, not in their best form. They are not on any outpost or anything, but you can see that at least they are helping a lot. The knight on c2 defends the d4 square, as well as sometimes threatens to go knight b4, as well as knight e3 ideas. Also supports b4. The knight on c3 defends the d5 square, as well as knight a4, knight b6 idea in the future. Whereas these two knights, at least they have an idea or a route, a route to maneuver to a better place. But now just take a look at this bishop and this knight. This bishop, first of all, is inside the pawn chain. It can't really do anything on this diagonal. The e6 square is actually not doing a lot. Well, actually e6 is okay, just trying to open up the d file for the rooks to come over. That is the best square, I think. Other squares okay, f5 is under control by white's pawn. g4 doesn't do anything. There's f3, and of course h3, you're just giving your bishop away. And if you retreat it back to c8, well, it actually doesn't really do anything. And now let's compare this, let's now take a look at this knight. The main reason that knight e8 is a mistake is because it's now it cannot be moved at all, in these few moves, because it is now in duty to defend the d6 pawn, which means that black's pieces are actually pretty passive, and white needs to speed up her attacking speed or come up with some ideas. Bishop e6 is played in the game after knight e3, g6. Black's idea is trying to push for f5, and after rook ac1, white's idea is probably here to go knight a4 or b4 c5 ideas. Queen a7, b4, rook b8, a3, defending the b4 pawn, f5, and c5. You can see that in this position, both sides are starting to go for their own plans. Black's idea is to go for f5, and now she has gone for f5, and white's idea has already accomplished as well. Now it's just a matter of speed and time. Even though black is the one to push the pawn first, but after c5, there's nothing deadly that black can do immediately. And let's see what happened in the game. In the game, black didn't play the best move, and she played f takes e4, missing the opportunity to grab some of white's advantages back. Here, already white is having a slight advantage already, positional advantage, of course. White, if I were to choose in this game, or in this position, who I want to play with, the side that I want to play with, it's definitely white, because you can just compare, first take a look at white's side, you can see a lot of space, and take a look at black's side. It just looks kind of it just doesn't seem that convenient, or doesn't seem that convenient. And the c6 pawn will always be a weakness once the c file is open. And on white's side, there's no clear weaknesses yet. The a3 pawn is still well hidden behind the a6 pawn. Everything is actually kind of okay for white. And here, so black is actually in a dilemma whether to open up the king side or to open up the center with d takes c5. And actually, after d takes c5, what will probably take with b takes c5, and after Of course, you cannot take on c5 because you'll like fall into not a trap, but you have to take with the g pawn here, and there's like knight c d5. White is not winning any material, but of course, white's pieces are now getting into black's territory, and black is actually forced to take with the g pawn, which means that her king will be now really like what's the word? Like really weak. And after d takes c5, b takes c5, of course, black will not take on c5. But let's say if black goes something like f4 to push the pawn to attack the knight. Let's say white goes knight c4, and after knight c4, queen takes c5 then. But there's like knight a4 now attacking the queen. The queen, let's say, goes to b5. Knight a b2, for example. This position, let's say after takes, knight takes, even though here black is up a pawn, but white has a lot of compensation for that. And white here is actually already like much better because of like here sometimes you just have to know a pawn sometimes is not the most important thing. Like material is sometimes not the most important thing. For example, in this position, you're down a pawn as white, but you're like your pieces active, like they're so active, and compared to black's pieces, they're just way too passive. And that is like the compensation is just way enough even over a pawn. That is why here black didn't choose like that is why like here like after f4 like that is why I mean black is still not worse after that position that we've just reached, and that is why d takes c5 is actually the best choice. Other moves are even worse than d takes c5 actually. And in the game, she played f takes e4. Like black here played f takes e4, and Zhu Jiner took with the queen. Of course, if you take with the knight, then black will be able to successfully push d5, and actually after d5, black will be able to equalize the position, and white no longer has any more counterplay in the center. That is why, of course, you take with the queen, and after d5, well, actually d5 just falls immediately for white's trick. Here, what black should have do is instead is to go bishop b3 to attack the rook, and let's say rook d3 or rook d2, for example, here, then black will take on c5. And after, like, if you take on c5, this is not good, because after queen takes c5, you're opening up diagonals and files for black, actually, trying to, like, you're helping black activate her pieces. And after, for example, knight g4 attacking the e5 pawn, black will just take the a3 pawn. And after like some calculation, you'll find out that black is actually doing completely fine. In the game, d5 was played, however. Black didn't, like, Laura here didn't find the best move, which is to go like bishop b3 first and then d takes c5, and instead she played d5. But d5 just falls immediately for queen takes e5, and after knight g7, there's now knight e2. You can see that now black no longer has this e5 knight. Not knight, but e5 pawn. And now the d4 square and f4 square are open to white's knights. Like, they're all outposts for white's knight. And the c3 knight is now going for the d4 square, which is actually a really strong square, because once the knight reaches that square, it will attack the e6 bishop as well as the c6 pawn. Queen f7 attacking the f2 pawn, rook f1 defending it, rook b e8, queen d6, bishop d7, knight d4. So you can see that Zhu Jiner is actually pushing pushing all the pieces up the board, and you can see that black is actually having some trouble with maneuvering her pieces. In the game, she played knight h5, but like this is actually a mistake. What he should have played is actually to go knight e6, quickly offer a trade of knights, because if you just as black, if you keep the knight on d4, white's knight on d4, then it's actually really dangerous, because the knight on d4, the longer it stays on d4, the stronger it will be, because later on black will just be like it will be impossible for black to offer a trade of the knights, because probably at that point white has already gone knight g4 and threatened like knight h6 threats or knight e5 threats. So black needs to trade off this knight as fast as she can, but unfortunately in the game she played knight h5. maybe she thought that in this position she is not worse at all, and she thought that maybe she had a lot of counterplay on the king side. But unfortunately, this is actually just like her wrong evaluation of this position. Knight c6 was played in the game. Actually, this is a mistake played by Zhu Jiner. She was actually perhaps she was like thinking of winning, but it's actually just happening too fast. She had first of all get her pieces to the right place. First, play rook c e1 to go over the e file, and after, let's say, black goes knight f4, following her knight h5 plan. Now knight c2, defending the d4 knight and offering a trade of rooks on the e file. And let's say if black takes, you now take with the rook, and after knight d3, you might think that, wait a second, the f2 pawn is hanging. But after you go rook f1, if black were here were to play knight f2, there's now knight e3. Black has no way of running out of this pin, and this knight will be taken after a few moves. That is why rook c1 is the best move here. Slowly, first of all, get your pieces to the best places, and then go for the killing attack. But unfortunately here, Zhu Jiner actually played too fast, I guess. Like, she was trying to win this game too fast, and she played this knight c6 move, giving away half of her advantage. But still, she is better. And after knight f4, missing the opportunity for black to equalize the position here is actually to take. And after queen takes c6, then go knight f4. At least it's knight versus knight, and these two knights are both really active. Black here will have more counterplay, probably later on threaten to go d4, and still unclear actually. But unfortunately, black here played knight f4 immediately, allowing white to get the knight away from the light square bishop's attack. And after knight e5, attacking the queen as well as the bishop here, actually I think black just simply mislooked, or like she didn't saw this knight e5 idea, just forking the bishop and the queen. And now she has to give up half her half piece. And after d4, king h1. This is actually a really good move here, king h1. The point is that, first of all, you're running away from knight e2, and the reason that you do not go knight e2 here immediately is because after here, knight c1, rook c1, queen f2, well, actually queen f2, there's queen d5. Black is just up, but black is just down too many pawns, and probably black didn't want to, still wants to preserve more pieces. And in the game she played after takes. Also, like knight e3 will end in the same. There's like this one, knight takes, for example, and queen takes first, I guess. And after king takes, rook takes, you're just up like 3 pawns, and it should be winning, right? It should be winning. Like, even if you're a beginner, you're up 3 pawns in this position, you should know how to win. All right. Probably black still wants to try to find some counterplay, and that she played d4 here. The main problem is that if white were to take, now there's knight e2, forking the queen, the rook, as well as the king. And here, black will be winning, because after king h1, you'll lose the queen. But of course, Zhu Jiner saw that, and she played, like, in order to run away from knight e2, she played this king h1 move, which is a brilliant move, given 2 exclamation marks. And I think it's actually just worth it, the 2 exclamation marks, because it is really a great move. If you go for other moves like rook c1, trying to defend the e2 square this way, but there's now, after d takes e3, rook takes e3, black is not, black is even actually slightly better here, because black has 2 minor pieces for a rook, and the rook on f1 is now a complete defending piece, defending the f2 pawn. And black is, white is already in some trouble if something like rook cu1 is played. But in the game, king h1 was played, and I think this is what her opponent overlooked. Because now the main problem is that if black were to take with d takes e3, there's now f takes e3, there's this pin, and black will never get out of it and lose the f4 knight. Let's say if black goes knight d3, the only try, but now actually white can just go back with queen a1, defend the back flank, and after, for example, knight f2, you go king g1 back, and again, black falls into this pin, and it should be winning later on. Like, you will, like, as white, you will definitely find a way to win this knight. King h1 92 was played in the game, but now there's just knight d5. Actually, here there's this really beautiful win with knight f5, which is like the best move. It's not that hard to see actually. If it were like, well, like, it is the best move, but knight d5, that knight d5 play in the game is also fine. Knight f5, the winning way after knight f5 is that there's after, for example, like g takes f5, white will take the e2 knight, and white will be up half a piece. And if you take with any other pieces, bishop takes, there's queen takes e2, queen takes, there's queen takes e2 as well. It's actually just kind of like a discovered attack, but need a little bit of calculation, I guess. And you cannot take on c1 because that is just mate in 1, knight h6. So knight f5 will be winning even faster, but like even cleaner. But in the game, knight d5 was played, which is also good, threatening knight e7. And in the game, bishop e6 was played, but after queen takes c2, bishop d5, f3, fixing all of the problems. The f2 pawn, the g2 pawn are now safe. Queen g2. Here you have to be a little careful if black might have some tactics on the f3 pawn. Like, sometimes if you are like the f3 pawn is not being like protected well, it might be like black might be able to sacrifice a few pieces on the f3 pawn and find a way to create like repetition or something. But you just have to be slightly careful about that, and everything else is completely fine. Queen d2 was played in the game, attacking the d4 pawn, rook d8, but you can just actually take it because there's no discovered attack here. And after rook d7, rook c d1, queen b5, rook fe1, queen a4, but it's actually just a very clean win. Rook e8, king f7, rook de1, queen takes a3, and queen f4. And here, black resigned the game, and Zhu Jiner won this game. This is actually not the most crucial game in this whole tournament, but I think this is one of her best games played in this tournament. Her opponent is a women's grandmaster, Rogule. She has a rating of 2266, and not that high, but also not that low. In this game, Zhu Jiner had an accuracy of 93.2, really good chess. And of course, we can learn a lot of things from this game, like the move king h1 here. This is a brilliant move, and also we can learn something from the opening as well. You can see that now. You can see that Zhu Jiner actually played this line bishop b5, and you can now see what will happen. For example, okay, c4. What if I go bishop d7, or what happens after c4? You can see you can learn a lot of things from this game. And in the end, it was a very clean win by her. And I think that's it for today's video. Hope you guys learned something from this game and enjoyed my video as well. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!